This is the story of one of Africa's most courageous and visionary leaders, but his name was forbidden and feared by the colonial oppressors. He led the first political movement in sub-Saharan Africa that demanded the freedom and unity of his country, Cameroon. His name was Ruben Nyobe, Cameroon's father of independence. He was the founder of the UPC, Union of the People of Cameroon, but he paid the ultimate price for his struggle as he was assassinated by the French colonial forces. Nyobe grew up witnessing the atrocities and injustices of French colonialism in his homeland and beyond. He saw how his people were insulted, dehumanized, and exploited by foreign invaders. So he decided to speak out against tyranny and oppression. At age of 35, he established the UPC, a party that aimed to liberate Cameroon from both the British and French colonial rule and to unite the divided nation. The party's symbol was a red flag with a crab. The red was representing the blood of the martyrs who died for independence. The black represented the skin of African people, and the crab represented the unity of Cameroon. In 1955, 5 years before Cameroon's official Independence Day, the UPC made a bold move. They issued the Common Proclamation, a declaration of independence that did not ask for permission or approval from anyone. They asserted their sovereignty and dignity as a nation. The French colonizers felt threatened and outraged by this act of defiance, so they declared war on the UPC and forced Nyobe to go underground. On May 22nd, the UPC announced that they no longer recognized French authorities over Cameroon. The UPC was the most popular and influential political party in Cameroon at that time, but France could not tolerate any challenge to its colonial domination in West Africa. France was determined to crush any African aspiration for self-determination and autonomy on their own land. In July 13 of the same year, the party was outlawed by the French authorities. The UPC was excluded from participating in the general elections of December 1956. The party had no choice but to resort to armed resistance, so they formed the military wing, the National Organizing Committee, and launched the guerrilla warfare against the colonial regime. The French army responded in a brutal campaign of oppression and violence. They called it pacifications, a euphemism for colonial wars and decolonization battles that aimed to subjugate and silence the colonized people. For a whole year, they hunted down Nyobe, the leader of the UPC, and on December 13, 1958, they finally tracked him down in his village, and he was unarmed, defenseless, but they shot him in the back. But they did not stop there. They wanted to humiliate him and his followers. So they tied his body behind a car and dragged him around town to intimidate and demoralize his supporters. They also killed many of his supporters in an horrific way, showing no respect for human life and dignity, and also began the process of erasing Nyobe's legacy. The French colonizing forces did not stop there. They unleashed the campaign of the G word against the Bamileke people of Cameroon who supported the UPC cause. So between 1957 and 1970, French troops dropped the napalm bomb on Bamileke villages, claiming between 100,000 to 400,000 lives. Those who survived were imprisoned in concentration camps and were tortured and starved. Some experts argue that this was one of the worst crimes against humanity committed by France in Africa. But for many years, France denied and tried to conceal its involvement. The truth, however, could not remain hidden forever. Many survivors who are still alive today have testified of the horrors they endured. The name Ruben Nyobe was also suppressed and censored for over 30 years after Cameroon's independence. The colonial regime and the puppet government that took over tried to erase his memory and his contribution to the liberation of his country. They feared his influence and his legacy, but they could not silence his voice or his spirit. Today, 65 years later, I am here sharing the story with you. In the year 2000, his son was finally allowed to build a grave in the honor of his father, who is rightfully regarded as the father of Cameroon's independence. Ruben Nyobe once said, Colonizers resort to violence because they have no argument to challenge us. His life reminds me of Jimmy Cliff's song, The Harder They Come, where he says, I'd rather be a free man in my grave than live as a puppet or a slave.